Okay, so with Spyro A Realm Beyond coming along, I wanted to ask the question that I know can be equivalent to handling the Demon Core, but I have to ask, should we see Cynder in Spyro A Realm Beyond? Let's talk about it.
Whoa!
What's up guys, Canadian Guy here, and if you're a vet of the channel, you may have seen a video like this before. That's because I did do something like this similarly back during the Spyro Reignited days, but that was also 8 years ago, and the people who originally watched it are either now adults or their backs hurt a lot more than it did then. Moreover, it's also a different scenario. Let's just cut to the chase. Should Cynder be in Spyro A Realm Beyond? But I want to make this clear so that people know what I'm talking about. I am not talking about just a reskin for Spyro. I am talking about her own individual character. Would she be playable? Well, let's just set that aside for a second and let's just get to her being in the game. Now, before I give my personal thoughts, I actually asked all of you over on a YouTube post and Twitter, and after combining both the polls, 73% of you said yes, and 27% of you said no. However, these votes also came with an incredible amount of comments that explain their reasoning, which I'm very thankful for because it paints a much more nuanced picture than just yes and no. Now, before I dive into those comments, I want to go back and make clear as to what my stance is in regards to Cynder. Cynder is a complicated character for me, so much so that the script that you are currently watching, this video that you're watching and reading, or however you're consuming this, has already been cut in half and set aside for another video, which I'll get to in a bit. But overall, I think Cynder has a lot of potential and that could be easily ingrained into Spyro A Realm Beyond. But I just don't want her to just be there if she has no purpose. Her involvement in the new game should be more integral to the story, or at least a side story, and not just shoehorned in because she's a fan favorite. When we get this new game, if Cynder is advertised, but her involvement to the story is an equivalent to a cardboard cutout stand-in, I don't think anyone would be happy about that. We do know Spyro is being sent off to a new and distant realm, so it's possible that there are other dragons that we will encounter that are brand new, so Cynder may be among them. But I digress. Let's get to the summary of what many of you have said, and then the specific comments. On top of the thousands of votes, we had about 136 registered unique commenters. 73 of them were positive, 34 of them were mixed, and 29 of them were pretty much negative. Now, for the positive side, the overall sentiment is that she is extremely popular and a beloved Spyro character who has made an impact on the franchise. Some have suggested that she should work similarly to how Ratchet and Rivet worked in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Some also think that this being a new realm could be the perfect place and opportunity and timing to introduce a new dragon. However, there is a complete and total split on the type of relationship that Spyro and Cynder should have. Should they have a young, budding romance? Should they just be friends? Should they be friendly rivals? Distant siblings? Maybe even enemies at first? This is the most widespread opinion overall that is not even remotely close to being consistent. Now, let's start with the first comment. Victorian5019, for example, says, I like the thought of Cynder being reintroduced as a character that was from the new realm. Either she's trapped there too, or she's from there. Either way, her not knowing Spyro from the start would be a good take on it. I do agree with this. Cynder shouldn't be from the Dragon Realms because, well, we don't see her beforehand. She should be from somewhere else, whether that's the realm that Spyro is stuck in or perhaps another where she's also stuck in that realm. But I do think that it gives a lot of room for story and growth. Next comment from Dark and Windy says, yes, she's an extremely popular character, Folks who only like the OG trilogy may dislike her, but she's a much more complex and interesting character than Allura or Ember in my honest opinion. Plus, in the Skylander show, they acknowledge her and Malefor, so there's always a chance. I'm not sure if both Cynder and Malefor being mentioned in Skylanders gives them more or less of a chance, but the overall sentiment I'm getting is, hey, if they could show up there, why not in a realm beyond? I also think saying Allura or Ember isn't as interesting is a bit of an unfair comparison, because Allura was present in one game and in one cinematic in the third game, and Ember had like 3 lines. Meanwhile, Cynder was in 3 games, was the main villain of the first game, and was playable in the third. But I do agree that Allura and Ember aren't as fleshed out, especially Ember. Finally, a Quad Drifter says, if she works like Rivet in Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, it would be neat. She's just the Beyond Realms version of Spyro. Or heck, it would be neat to also just see her be the villain again. I didn't think Cynder being an alternate reality Spyro personally. It's an interesting idea, but Crash Bandicoot 4 was already accused of taking ideas from Rift Apart, and while of course it was a sheer coincidence, making Spyro and Cynder's relationship exactly like Ratchet and Rivet may be getting too close to the sun at this point, but an interesting idea nonetheless. Which now leads us to our mixed crowd. Now, I want to note, the mixed crowd may lean towards positive or negative, but they overall give a reason as to why they feel like this. Lumi Laura, yes, the Laura, the speedrunner, said, yes, but I believe she would need heavy retooling to feel like she realistically belongs in what is supposedly a continuation of the original trilogy's world and lore. Thing is, I think this would end up disappointing a lot of existing Cynder fans. So is there a point to doing it? There is something dangerous that I do agree with here. Conforming Cynder away from some of the really dark themes that were established in the Legend of Spyro games may not create the desired effect for her fans within a realm beyond. There's a big reason for this that I will explain at the end of this video. Next up, we have BladeMan54, who said, I think there's room for her in this new continuity, but since this is the first Spyro game in around 8 years and the first one in 20, putting her in and justifying it in this game might stifle what Toys for Bob can do with their own new characters in this realm beyond. I think if they tease her at the end, maybe Spyro doesn't make it back to the Dragon Realms at the end of the game, his absence messes with either the Dragon Realms or all realms, and Cynder is sent to find him and correct things, as either an inhabitant of like an Aether realm with Aether dragons, or even just a dragon from the Dragon Realms, gives Toys for Bob a chance to do their own thing without over-relying in expanded universes. Same reason I don't want to see Crash in this game. Spyro needs a time to shine with Toys for Bob doing their own thing before we start pulling from pre-established universes from the years prior. I do agree that we have to be careful with balancing legacy and new characters. Toys for Bob should have creative freedom to make new characters that we have never seen before. I do think that Spyro needs to be the star of this game, and an argument could be made that introducing Cynder could pull away from the fact that this is the first Spyro game in 20 years. Kicking the can down the road by making her a post-credit scene may be a smart way to go about it. Again, depending on the story and approach that Toys for Bob wants to take in a realm beyond. Finally, we get to Samaron8970, who says, it really does depend on how they would handle it. Cynder is a special character to a lot of us, and you can't really divorce her from darker themes without losing things. That isn't to say her story can't be simplified. Skylanders Academy deciding to just make her Malefor's daughter gets to a similar result while sidestepping the themes of kidnapping and brainwashing. It was a good idea. The issue there was that they also didn't want to make her any darker than the rest of the cast. Cynder doesn't need to be dark as she was in Legends, but she does need to be notably more serious than the original 3 games to maintain her identity. I want Cynder back, not another dragon with Cynder's name. I feel like this comment is actually really strong and really close to how I kind of feel on the matter. And lastly, we get to the negative outlook. Liliana says, no. Unless they are planning to merge universes, then they should stay in the TLOS trilogy and Skylanders, I guess, but I don't accept that as an actual Spyro series. Cynder glazing has gotten extremely annoying. I want Flame and Ember to come back instead, and the Elders. This kind of opens a deep lore question in the Spyro universe overall. This comment assumes that the events of A Hero's Tale actually happened in the original universe, which then brings into question Enter the Dragonfly. Did that game happen too? I also want to repeat what I said earlier in that Ember had very little screen time, but somehow Flame had even less. So I'm not sure I agree with this comment, but the overall comment does open a curious question about Spyro lore and the universe in general that I hope is at least answered in A Realm Beyond. The next question comes from Key Rift. I never played the Legend of Spyro games and personally never liked how somber/serious it looked from the outside. I would prefer to avoid that path if possible. Now, I want to include this comment because I think it brings a really important point from someone who did enjoy the original trilogy, but avoided the Legend series due to the mood shift. This is a potential risk of introducing Cynder. That total mood shift was something that affected many fans, myself included. It's why I never played the Legend series on original hardware and only played them well over a decade after that they were released. I also remember specifically when I was working at my old animation job when this channel was actually starting to take off. I was in a conversation with a coworker where she said she remembered playing and loving Spyro, but got turned off by the darker tone of the Legend of Spyro series. She was in fact worried that the Reignited trilogy that was coming out at the time was a remake on those games. Now again, I'm not saying this will affect every fan. I'm saying that it may affect some in the casual crowd who are looking from the outside in. And finally, we have Violet Nexus. No, it's best to leave Toys for Bob to make their own game without being shackled to the past. If she makes sense to be there, sure, but if it's just for gratification, then nah. I do agree, especially with the gratification part. I think Cynder is a really important character, and having her essentially be shoehorned into the game would just make fans overall not happy. And those who aren't fans of her, even though her involvement may be small, would be generally upset. Overall, especially after reading everyone's comments, I do think Cynder can be in this game, but she has to be involved in a very, very specific way. There has to be space where it makes sense for her to be there, while also not rewriting and recreating her whole character. However, I do believe that there is a deep-seated problem with Cynder. In her current state, I do not believe that she would work for A Realm Beyond for a multitude of reasons. But I also believe that she is relevant enough and important enough to be included in the game. So I decided to sit down, figure out the problems with Cynder's original backstory, why they wouldn't work in A Realm Beyond, and most importantly, I believe I figured out how we could rewrite and include her without it alienating any of her original fans and her fans still enjoying this new story. And I'll be posting that video as soon as it's done on this channel, so make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.